DJI just brought out the Mavic 4 Pro here, which I purchased from my own money and I paid the full price. This video is not sponsored in any way, not even by another company. And I mean, we've already seen all the reviews out there, so I don't think I have to go through all the specs again of this drone and features. What I'm interested in is that DJI claims this drone, or at least the wide angle lens, would have 16 stops of dynamic range, which sounds pretty ridiculous, and it usually means that those are just marketing numbers. So I wanted to figure out for myself if that's actually true, if the dynamic range of this drone is actually that good, and also how it stacks up with the tele camera, because they are always pretty nice. So I ran some tests today, which I want to share with you, and by the end of this video I will also give you my initial thoughts about this drone, because there are some things that I really like, but also some things that I dislike and that I didn't even consider before. Let's get right into it. I kind of have to rush out this video because I'm on a trip tomorrow and the next days, so I wouldn't really have time to publish the video on the weekend, and I wanted to get that out to you quickly so that you can make a proper buying decision. And now, I'm not Gerald Andan, so I don't have a Zyler 21 here and can give you concrete numbers about the dynamic range, but I can compare this drone to cameras that we know the dynamic range of, namely the Sony a7C Mark II, which I'm also shooting on right now, which you could say after cleaning up the shadows has about 14 stops of dynamic range. So this is what I compare all cameras of this drone to, and I exposed so on every camera that the highlights were just 1/3 of a stop before clipping, and then I simply lifted the shadows in post to see how much detail and noise we can see on which camera. And the settings I've used on the Mavic 4 Pro for all cameras were that I turned both noise reduction and digital sharpening off by setting them both to -2. I'm not sure if they're actually turned off then, but it's at least the lowest setting that we can get. So let's have a look at the results, and straight out of camera, without any color space transforms, LUTs or so, it actually looks like that the Mavic 4 would hold a little more dynamic range, but after doing a base color space transform in DaVinci Resolve, it is pretty much equal to the a7C Mark II, but I have to say after lifting the shadows that the Sony has a bit finer noise, which definitely looks better. But after applying simple temporal noise reduction in DaVinci Resolve with just 10 points, the noise on both cameras is gone. And looking at after that, it looks a bit like the Mavic would have slightly more detail, but it could also come from a slightly different camera angle, so I'm not too sure about that. What I can definitely say though is that the Mavic 4 Pro's main camera does not have 16 usable stops of dynamic range. That's definitely a marketing number. However, I find it quite impressive that it's actually that close with the a7C Mark II. I'm sure if I would do more tests, which I didn't have the time for today, I would probably find that maybe the a7C would be slightly above it, but it's really not a huge difference. So much about the wide angle camera of this drone. It's definitely impressive what DJI did there, but they could be a bit more realistic with their marketing numbers. Anyway, let's come to the 70mm lens now, and there we can definitely see that it has less than 14 stops. Like, the shadows are not just darker, but they're also less detailed. When we look at the Sony, it looks like there would be more noise in the shadows actually, but if we look closer, we also see that it holds a lot more usable detail. So if we clean it up by applying noise reduction, we can actually see that the Sony looks a lot crisper in the shadows, while the Mavic looks already a little bit mushy, so there isn't that much detail left anymore in there. To be fair, if we wouldn't pixel peep it, if we would just use a normal non-cropped in image that you shot somewhere out of the air, most people probably wouldn't really notice a big difference there. It's more like for professional eyes, but well, it is there, and so we can definitely say that the dynamic range is lower there. And it's also kind of in line with the marketing of DJI, not with the actual numbers, but in terms of that they also say that this camera would have 2 stops less dynamic range as the wide angle lens, which honestly I wouldn't necessarily say it's a 2-stop difference. It looks a bit smaller to me, but it's definitely below 14 stops dynamic range. And coming to the 6x zoom lens, the 166mm one, there we definitely see quite a bit more noise in the shadows directly, but I have to say that I like how the lens performs. Like, we get a decent amount of background blur, the image in the foreground is quite sharp, and I see all the necessary detail, and I did not expect that from this lens. So they really improved the 6x zoom lens. I think it was actually a 7x lens on the Mavic 3, now it's a 6x one, but it's definitely good. And after noise reduction, it's even better, it's much closer to the Sony then. Of course, if you really look into it, you will see differences there, but I was impressed by how much detail I can see, and that's probably because I'm closer, as I've been with the 70mm lens, so that makes it a bit easier to render for the sensor, obviously. I think that's just the reason why we see a good amount of detail there, but still, like, I have to say, DJI really worked on that lens, and it is so much better now as it was on the original Mavic 3 and 3 Pro, I think. Yeah, there were 2 drones with this lens, so pretty cool. And I'm sure I will use this lens a lot. What I also have to say here is that you actually need less dynamic range for the tele lenses, because if you think about it, if you have a wide angle shot, it's much more likely that you have bright areas in the sky, for example, and some dark areas in the shadows, both in one frame. While if you use, for example, the 160mm lens, you only have a really small frame there that you film, and it's just less likely that you have these big variances in brightness levels. Anyway, let's also come to my other initial thoughts about this drone. At first, when I came into the camera store today, I also had a quick look at the RC Pro 2 controller, which, of course, it's nice, you can flip the screen up and stuff, but I also found that it is a little clunky. Like, I travel a lot, and I do prefer having a normal RC2 controller from DJI for the DJI Mavic 4 and also other drones, because it just fits a bit nice in the backpack, saves me some space, and I don't absolutely need a super nice screen quality that you get there, which is basically the main advantage. And I think that this, like, flipping the screen and then the camera flips around and stuff, it's kind of a gimmick to me, which is probably also because I'm not really big on short form content. So yeah, I went for the normal fly mode combo. I think you can save some money there, especially if you travel a lot. And also a few observations from my first test flight and color grading the footage after that. At first, yes, the footage looks bad. It was just cloudy today. Couldn't change it, had no chance. I was also not able to get the drone before sunrise to at least get some mist in the mountains and stuff. It was just not possible today. Anyway, when I brought the clips into DaVinci Resolve and used color management there with normal D-Log from all those 3 lenses, I did notice that the colors of our 3 lenses actually match really well. You also see that here. So when it comes to color grading, DJI nailed it here. They really match the cameras well. And actually the fact that you have normal D-Log and not the stupid D-Log M available on all cameras was the big reason why I bought it, because D-Log M is fine for color grading Rec 709. It actually works really good there with the DJI LUT, but I color grade HDR, as you've probably seen already. And for that, I just need color space transforms. LUTs just don't do the job for that. And it's just great to have D-Log on all lenses available. So it's definitely nice to see on top of that it's not just that we have the same picture profile or log profile available on all lenses, but that the color science actually also matches up really well. And one little tip, which I did not try out yet on the Mavic 4, but I know it already from the DJI Air 3, is regarding the noise that we saw in the dynamic range test, which is like, I had noise reduction turned down to -2. It is fine if you use -1, it still looks pretty good on those cameras. At least it was the case on the Air 3, so I expected on the Mavic 4 to be either better or at least around the same, because if you don't want to have this step of using noise reduction in post for certain shots, like on most shots you won't need that at all, but you know, there are those critical shots sometimes, then I would probably just set it to -1 and you will be fine. This is actually what I did all the time on the DJI Air 3, because I found it a little bit too noisy straight out of camera, and I also don't want to apply noise reduction all the time in post. So just a little tip here. And also what I noticed during exposing those shots on the Mavic 4, it feels like that you have to expose to the right a lot more to get the most dynamic range there, which of course it's generally the case with log profiles to maximize dynamic range. But On my Sonys, for example, I generally expose just so that it looks good on the screen, while especially on the telelenses on the Mavic 4, I noticed that I would have to expose a lot brighter, so my skin already looked way too bright, but therefore I saw that there is a lot more detail available in the shadows now, otherwise they look pretty crushed. So I would suggest you, when you use especially the tele cameras, but also found it a bit on the wide one, to just expose a bit more to the right and bring the exposure down again in post, then you get a bit nicer shadows. Again, like it's generally the science behind log profiles to shoot like that, but I found on pretty much most cameras that I've used over the past 3 or 4 years that's actually not really necessary anymore. Like the shadows are usually so clean that you can just expose normally, but here I find that it's better to be a bit brighter there with your shots, at least when you shoot in D-Log. So much about my initial dynamic range tests and observations. I can definitely say that the quality has improved. So if you watched some reviews before and you've not been sure because I was sponsored and stuff, yes, DJI did improve all of that. So if you're thinking of getting this drone, get it, but you don't necessarily need the 512GB version with the new controller. The normal Fly More combo, or even the lower one, if you don't need that much flight time with 3 batteries, is perfectly fine. Aside from that, I will shoot a lot with this drone, or pretty much every day with it over the next 2 weeks to publish more videos. I have one cinematic footage video planned up to really show you what this drone can do. Just wish me luck, because the weather is really not in my favor right now. Rainy season just started here in Thailand. And also after probably 3 or 4 weeks, I will do a more long-term review of this drone after really testing it, so that I can give you some more thoughts and findings hopefully about this drone. So definitely subscribe for that. And yeah, I hope to see you in the future.